Hello there! Do you know what a group of finches is called? It's called a charm. And I just think that's a really fitting name for these lovely little creatures. And these lovely little creatures are the subject of this lesson. But before we get into it, if you love art and you're not there now, then come over to www.montmarte.net where we've got lots more lessons. We've also got our Facebook and our Creative Connection. And if you subscribe to that, we'll send you a lot of really cool stuff. So let's get into it and create a charm of finches. For this painting to work, I need that soft background so I can sort of emulate that out of focus look. I also don't want the background to be too bold, or it may take away from my subject, the finches, and I don't want that. To facilitate this nice soft blending, we need to control the speed at which the acrylics dry at. To do that, I'm going to use a Mont acrylic retarder, and I'm going to put a nice thin coat over the entire canvas. So let's get this acrylic retarder on. I apply this with a 75mm Taklon, and as I said, I want a thin, consistent coat. Obviously, the thicker the coat, the longer one has to blend. So that canvas has a really nice thin coat of acrylic retarder over it, and I've squeezed out some yellow ochre, some mid-green, some raw umber, some titanium white in the silver series, and some mauve in the dimension series, all in acrylic. So let's get this colour on. Again, I use the 75mm Taklon to apply my paint. This too receives a relatively thin coat. The thing is to create a coat mottled so the colour is not too uniform. Work in stages and softly blend adjacent areas. And when you're happy with the blend, move to the next area. The thing here is to blend enough white into the green and ochre to create realistic tones. In nature, colours are more dulcet than the bright hues that come out of the tube. Keep the brush moving quickly and try to create as much variation as you can. So once we're happy with the rough application we get from the 75mm Taklon, I can bring out my number 24 chunking flat. And I know this is an oil brush, but it still has the hog hair stiff filaments, so we can scrub, scumble and smooth this last stage. If you have been fairly quick, the coat will still be a little wet. This step is important to smooth off everything and add in a few dark areas of tone here and there. Well, I could keep going with that and make it really smooth, but I'm quite happy with the way it looks, and it looks just right to me. Next, we're going to create our branches. If you refer to the PDF lesson plan that you can find at www.montmarte.net in the TV section, you'll find this little branch placement guide. I'm going to lay the branches in with titanium white and my favourite brush, the number 12 angle. So let's get these branches on. The trick with laying in branches like this is to not think too much about placement. Otherwise it can come out looking contrived. A tree basically keeps to no pattern, and this randomness is better achieved by creating strokes without too much thought. The one thing, as branches always get thinner toward the end. Next, we can add some colour to our branches. So squeeze out some raw umber and some Payne's grey. And basically what we're doing is painting the bottom Payne's grey, the middle raw umber and the light part of the branch, the top which accepts the light, we're going to create in a light raw umber. So lay the umber into the middle of the branch and then Into this we can lay the other colours. Lay some Payne's Grey into the bottom side and blend it into the umber. For the top side, I mix umber with water and lay it in like a wash. Follow these steps for all of the branches and try to create variation. Well, they're looking great. I like the way they're turning out. The last thing that I like to do is take a palette knife and just scrape back a bit of that paint. This adds real texture. This step is optional, but it really adds a real texturous quality to that bark. So now the fun part, we can add our birds. Can you feel the excitement building? We're going to create our finch silhouettes via stencil. Now, if you refer to the PDF that I was talking about before and you print it out, you'll notice on the second image there is these finches. Now, I have drawn up 8 finches in various poses. So let's create these stencils. So squeeze out some Mont PVA glue onto a surface. In this case, a Mont tear-off palette. I then take a sketchbook and give it a thin coat of PVA with the 75mm artist brush. I'm doing this because the stencils are going to hold up better than an 80 GSM printout would. Once I have it glued, I weigh it with a heavy book. Now let's cut it out. Use the back of the sketchbook to protect your work surface. To cut my stencils, I'm using a set of Mont hobby knives. Now, if you are not yet an adult, then you may need one for this stage. And regardless of who you are, remember the golden rule. Always cut away from your person. I have printed these out at A3, but obviously if your project was smaller, you could print them out at A4. Keep these little cutouts because we'll be using them later in the project to help with colour placement and detail. So our stencils are now cut. The next step is to squeeze out some titanium white onto your tear-off palette. Lay your canvas flat. Place your stencil in the desired position. And then with a 50mm sponge roller, we can apply it. Of course, the colour placement of each bird is totally up to the artist. There are 7 perched birds to choose from, and as you lay them down, just think how they would congregate and relate to each other. You can turn the stencil around to create a mirror image if you're looking for more diversity. You can get 3 stencils with 1 roller application, but make sure you don't fill the sponge with too much paint, as we want this coat to be fairly thin. You might like to add just a couple of finches, or you might like to add lots and lots. You could make the scene really busy if you wanted. And finally, my favourite little one, the little zebra finch flying in, that I'm going to put about here. Now we can paint them. If you refer to the last image in the PDF, you will see a diagram that describes the colours of the zebra finch. To paint my finches, I'll be using my trusty number 12 angle again, as well as a gallery series brush set, and they're all fairly fine brushes. So let's paint some finches. Again, refer to the PDF in regards of colour placement. But for this first colour, grey, we just lay it in over the head, the back and down the belly. This grey is mixed from 1 part Payne's Grey to 3 parts titanium. I use the Payne's Grey because it has a slight blue tinge. It is also a fairly cool grey, and its neutral hue will complement its surrounding colours. Well, that's all the grey on. my little favourite finch up here, to suggest rapid wing movement, I've just blurred the wings a little bit. The next step is the brown grey, so let's mix that up and get it on. The brown is used in different strengths. For example, over the wings it's pure umber, but some of the grey is mixed in with the umber and painted into the shadow side of the bird. And over the back, to get a really thin coat, I mix it with water. This gives me a sort of glazed look, but that underlying warmth still shows through. If you look at the PDF, you will see the difference between the male and the female. But suffice to say, the female is missing the orange cheek patch, the zebra stripes, and the white spotted sienna wing coverts. For these, I use straight sienna applied with the small flat. I then mix in a buff colour from titanium white with a touch of yellow. I lay this over the belly, and as I do this, I am mindful of allowing some of that underlying tone to show through. Next, we can create the beaks, and I'm going to use vermilion, and this should really pop. For this step, I can't stress enough to carefully view the PDF and portray exactly the shape on each bird. What makes this a challenge is that the beak is being viewed from different angles, and foreshortening can change the shape that these are viewed at. This is why I suggest that the offcuts be used to accurately determine the shape. I like to use a small flat for the cheeks now, and I'm using yellow orange, and these only lie on the males. Again, I use the small flat to apply the cheeks, and again feel free to use the offcuts as a guide. Because the cheeks are basically a round shape, from a 3/4 view, these shapes become elliptical. Well, we can now add our black, and this should bring it all together. And I'm going to use the detailer and the liner here. So let's get this black on. Okay, so pop on a red spot for the eye, then we can start applying the black. Now this black really holds this all together, and although it looks quite involved, it's just the same steps on each bird, but perspective will cause slight difference. I take great care with the zebra stripes and just use the tip of the brush. I use my palm to hold the brush at the right distance from the canvas. I've also thinned the black out to the viscosity of cream. I then lay in a pink wash into the legs. I can then squeeze out some white and lay in a shine line into the beaks with that white. A spot for the highlight in the eye, the spots on the wing coverts, and the ventral bands on the tail. And with that, my charm of finches are complete. Well, I really hope that you enjoyed that. I've enjoyed creating it for you, and there is a lot of information in this lesson, but I think with the clever shortcuts, it really enables one to create a fairly complex work that looks more ambitious than it really is, I think. Thanks again for watching, and remember to keep on painting.